Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a stack of biographical texts, letters, and historical excerpts centered entirely on the life of Arnold Schoenberg.
A name that usually brings to mind a towering architect of modern 20th century classical music. He is often viewed strictly through the lens of dense music theory and intense academic debates.
But for our journey today, we're going to look past the textbooks. Our focus is firmly on the man himself. We want to delve into his personal stories, his human struggles, and the highly unexpected turns his life took.
Understanding Schoenberg, the human being, is absolutely essential. His personal life, his anxieties, and his intense internal world directly informed his identity as a composer. You simply cannot separate the art he created from the life he lived.
Let's unpack this. To make the journey clear and easy to follow, Flavio, we have structured our conversation for 4 distinct chapters. We will start with Chapter 1, The Self-Taught Polymath.
We should start at the very beginning. He was born into a lower middle-class Jewish family in the Leopoldstadt district of Vienna. This was an area that in earlier times served as a Jewish ghetto.
And his father made a modest living as a shoe shopkeeper. I'm trying to reconcile this humble image with the monumental composer he became, especially given that the sources note he was largely self-taught.
His lack of formal training is a crucial piece of his puzzle. To put it in perspective, Vienna at that time was the absolute center of the musical universe. It operated under the heavy shadows of giants like Beethoven and Brahms.
The conservatory system must have been notoriously rigorous then.
It was incredibly rigorous, yet Schoenberg only ever took basic counterpoint lessons.
For those listening, counterpoint is the highly complex art of weaving multiple independent melodic lines together so they harmonize perfectly.
Precisely. His only instructor for this was a composer named Alexander Zemlinsky. Interestingly, Zemlinsky later became his brother-in-law. Beyond those brief lessons, Schoenberg figured it out himself by obsessively studying scores.
So without the backing of an institution or wealthy patrons early on, how was he making a living while trying to establish himself?
In his 20s, he was essentially a working-class musician trying to carve out space for his creative voice. Just to make ends meet, he had to orchestrate operettas for other, more popular composers.
He was doing this grueling commercial work purely to earn a living,
while simultaneously pouring his soul into writing his own early, ambitious pieces. During this period, he composed the string sextet for Klärte Nacht, or Transfigured Night. It remains one of his most deeply emotional and respected early works.
That intense drive to create brings us to the first major, surprising personal detail from the sources. Schoenberg was not just a musician. He was a highly capable painter.
He was. Between 1908 and 1910, he executed about 65 oil paintings, and this was not just a private hobby.
He exhibited his work alongside famous visual artists like Wassily Kandinsky and Franz Marc as part of the renowned Der Blaureiter, or the Blue Rider group.
This polymathic nature shows how deeply the concept of expressionism ran in his blood. Expressionism is about capturing raw, subjective, often disturbing internal emotion, rather than a beautiful objective reality.
It is about taking an internal scream and putting it on a canvas or into a musical score.
Exactly that. He needed multiple mediums to process the world around him.
Processing the world around him was something he had to do quite defensively, particularly when it came to his religious identity. The texts detail some significant shifts in his faith.
It was a complex mixture of pragmatism and profound principle. In 1898, he converted to Lutheranism. The text suggests this was partly to strengthen his attachment to Western European cultural traditions.
But largely, it was a means of self-defense.
It was. Anti-Semitism was surging across Europe, and conversion was a survival tactic many felt forced to adopt.
He did not remain in the Lutheran Church for his entire life, though. In 1933, he formally returned to Judaism at a synagogue in Paris.
Returning to Judaism at that exact moment in history was his way of taking an unmistakable public stand against the rising Nazi regime. It highlights his deeply principled nature. He navigated a hostile world with pragmatism for decades, but when the time came, he made his convictions known clearly.
That unwavering conviction transitions us perfectly into the second chapter of his life: Rivalries, Mentors, and Betrayal. We really cannot talk about his evolution without looking at his dynamic with Gustav Mahler.
This relationship had a very rocky start. Schoenberg initially despised and openly mocked Mahler's music. He found it overly sentimental.
But then he attended a performance of Mahler's Third Symphony. The sources described the experience hitting Schoenberg like a thunderbolt.
The sheer scale and emotional depth of the work completely changed his stance. He went from being a harsh critic to eventually viewing Mahler as a saint.
The text mentioned that Mahler actually adopted Schoenberg as a protege, but Mahler also admitted he could no longer understand the music Schoenberg was eventually writing.
It speaks volumes about Mahler's character. It was a mentorship based on profound mutual respect rather than aesthetic agreement. Mahler looked at Schoenberg and saw an artist of absolute, terrifying integrity.
Even if Mahler's ears could not comprehend the new directions Schoenberg was exploring, Mahler trusted Schoenberg's mind.
Mahler even worried openly about who would look after Schoenberg after he passed away, knowing how hostile the musical establishment would be toward him.
The hostility from the establishment was one thing, but the turmoil in his personal life was perhaps even more devastating. In 1901, Schoenberg married Mathilde Zemlinsky, the sister of his only teacher.
And in 1908, a severe crisis struck their home. Mathilde left him for a painter named Richard Gerstl.
She eventually returned to Schoenberg later that year, but upon her return, Gerstl tragically died by suicide. The psychological toll this must have taken on Schoenberg is immense.
The alignment between this domestic tragedy and his musical evolution is staggering. It was exactly during this period of his wife's absence that Schoenberg composed his first piece entirely without a key.
It was the 13th song in a cycle called You Lean Against a Silver Willow.
To put that in perspective, a key in music acts like a home base. It is a center of gravity that tells the listener exactly where they are, and it provides a sense of resolution and safety at the end of a piece.
Schoenberg completely removed that home base.
He left the listener floating in space, unmoored, with no clear direction home. This completely shattered centuries of musical tradition. It perfectly mirrored how he felt when his wife abandoned him.
He also wrote his String Quartet No. 2 during this exact same crisis.
He did, and it is a breathtaking piece of art imitating life. In the final movement of that quartet, he introduces a soprano who literally sings a poem featuring the line, "I feel the air of other planets."
As she sings this, the music completely suspends traditional tonality. The personal devastation he experienced literally pushed him off the earth and forced him to break the boundaries of the known musical universe.
Art and life were entirely indistinguishable for him at that moment.
It is incredible how pain can act as a catalyst for revolution. That brings us to Chapter 3, War, Exile, and Hollywood Neighbors. He served in the military during World War I at age 42.
There is a deeply telling anecdote from his service. A superior officer demanded to know if he was the notorious Schoenberg.
Schoenberg replied, "Nobody wanted to be, someone had to be, so I let it be me."
That quote perfectly encapsulates his sense of burden. He genuinely believed it was his destiny to be the emancipator of dissonance.
Dissonance being a clash of notes that creates tension. Traditionally, it always had to resolve into a pleasant harmony.
Schoenberg emancipated those clashing notes, allowing them to exist freely without ever having to resolve. He felt he was tasked by history with this necessary evolution in art.
Even if the public despised him for it, and public hostility only grew, eventually taking a dangerous political turn. By 1933, the Nazi regime labeled his modern music as degenerate art,
Forcing him to emigrate and completely uproot his life. This is a man who was central to European high culture, suddenly stripped of his position.
Looking through the sources at his search for a new home, the details are both fascinating and deeply tragic. He applied for a teaching position at a conservatorium in Sydney, Australia.
He was flatly rejected. Decades later, his application was found bearing notes from the board citing him as Jewish and possessing dangerous tendencies.
He even considered emigrating to New Zealand, simply because he had a childhood fascination with their postage stamps.
Imagine being one of the greatest intellectual minds of the 20th century, applying anywhere you can, simply looking for a safe harbor, and being rejected based on pure prejudice and fear.
He does eventually find a safe harbor in the United States, settling in Los Angeles. I'm trying to picture this intense avant-garde European intellectual suddenly arriving in 1930s Hollywood.
The contrast is wonderfully surreal. The deeply serious composer bought a Spanish revival house in Brentwood Park, directly across the street from the famous child star Shirley Temple.
He played tennis regularly with George Gershwin.
The Schoenbergs hosted Sunday afternoon gatherings famous for excellent Viennese pastries. Their frequent house guests included the comedian Harpo Marx and the character actor Peter Lorre.
It shows a completely different, much softer, and highly social side of his daily life in exile.
It does.
Speaking of his life in Hollywood, the sources mention a quirky detail about his entertainment preferences. Schoenberg was apparently very interested in Hot Blonde Cassidy films.
Which were a series of simple, popular American westerns.
Left-wing screenwriters claimed he liked these films because of their underlying populist politics. But Schoenberg himself stated he was a bourgeois turned monarchist.
We must weigh in impartially here. We are not endorsing either the left-wing claims or the monarchist claims. What is evident is that people constantly tried to project their own political ideologies onto Schoenberg.
Various political factions desperately wanted to claim his intellectual endorsement for their own causes.
The ongoing debate over why a musical genius simply enjoyed a series of Western films perfectly illustrates how relentlessly the public tried to decode him.
That constant desire to decode him leads us perfectly into Chapter 4, the composer's ciphers and the fear of 13. Schoenberg actually invited some decoding when it came to his personal romances.
Following the death of his first wife, he eventually married Gertrude Kolisch. He embedded this new chapter of his life into his work in a brilliantly playful way.
He embedded a musical cipher into his Suite for Septet, Opus 29.
He prominently used the notes G and E flat. In German musical notation, E flat is called E, which represents the letter S. So the notes G and S acted as a secret musical cipher for Gertrude Schoenberg.
It is a deeply romantic gesture hidden within highly complex mathematical music. It proves his rigorous approach to composition was never devoid of human emotion.
But the sources also reveal that his brilliant mind was plagued by a paralyzing superstition, Triskaidekaphobia.
An intense, irrational fear of the number 13. Imagine being one of the most mathematically minded composers in history, yet being entirely debilitated by a specific number.
It dictated his actions significantly. He dreaded any year of his life that was a multiple of 13. For his 65th birthday, a friend actually hired an astrologer to cast a horoscope to check if the year would prove fatal.
He survived 65, but the fear never left him. Which brings us to the tragic irony of his 76th birthday in 1950.
An astrologer sent him a note pointing out something Schoenberg had apparently never considered. The digits of his new age, 7 plus 6 equaled 13.
The sources state this sudden realization stunned him and threw him into a deep depression.
He felt a sense of impending doom that he could not shake.
That overwhelming dread culminated on his final day, Friday, July 13th, 1951. He was sick, deeply anxious, and chose to stay in bed all day, trying to simply outlast the clock.
That night, his wife Gertrude looked at the timepiece in his room at 11:45 p.m. She later wrote that she thought to herself, another quarter of an hour and then the worst is over.
Just then, the doctor called her into the room. Schoenberg's throat rattled, his heart gave a powerful beat, and he passed away exactly 15 minutes before midnight.
It is a chilling conclusion to a remarkably complex life. Here's a man who completely revolutionized music by bravely breaking the centuries-old rules of harmony, yet he was ultimately entirely bound by the perceived rules of a numerical superstition.
Let us bring all of this together for you. We have journeyed through the life of a self-taught son of a shoe shopkeeper. We have seen him as a talented expressionist painter, a survivor of war and forced exile, and a man who embedded his deepest loves and his most paralyzing fears into his daily life and his art.
By understanding the human being behind the dense scores, the sheer force of the modern music he shaped becomes much more approachable. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, drawing from a very specific event in his life.
The sources note that in 1918, to combat the deteriorating relationship between contemporary composers and the public, Schoenberg founded a society for private musical performances in Vienna.
He completely banned critics from attending, he ignored the dictates of fashion, commerce, and popularity, and incredibly, for the first year and a half, he did not even allow his own music to be played.
He did all of this simply to create a safe, fiercely protected incubator for difficult, modern art to be rehearsed and understood without the pressure of immediate judgment.
It raises an important question for you to explore on your own. Consider how you consume media today. In our current hyper-connected world of algorithms, instant reviews, and constant inescapable public feedback, how would a modern creator even begin to build a truly protected space to nurture revolutionary, misunderstood ideas the way Schoenberg did?
A brilliant question to leave you with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Arnold Schoenberg. Keep questioning, keep listening, and we will see you on the next deep dive.